Today is February the 12th, 2022. This is video number 12. And today I want to talk about an update to why Thanos was right. Some of you will remember celebrated films Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War. And in these movies, there's a character named Thanos, and he is decidedly portrayed as the villain. However, since those two movies, there has been a movie called The Eternals that came out. And whether it meant to or not, and I think maybe it did, it paints Thanos in a very different light. So I will be discussing spoilers for The Eternals if you haven't seen that yet. Also, I'm not going to get into like some plot holes or conflicting information because maybe I'm foolish, but I'm going to trust that anything that looks like a plot hole now will be filled in by Marvel as they continue to make movies. So I'm not going to dwell on that. But I do want to discuss the idea that Thanos, the villain of Avengers Endgame and Infinity War, was actually right. So for those of you that maybe aren't as familiar, and if that's the case, I'm not sure why you're watching this, but you're certainly welcome to. Thanos wanted to destroy half of all life in the universe. And rather than do this in a grind, meaning like a military march throughout all the universe, which you can imagine would be quite daunting, there were some cosmic artifacts that he could bring together and simply snap his fingers and half of all life in the universe would cease to exist. Now, that's not really what these cosmic artifacts were designed for, but he assumed correctly that one could do that. So half of life in the universe was destroyed. Then the Avengers assembled, and they reversed what Thanos had done. And so 5 years from the time half of life in the universe was destroyed, half of life in the universe came back. Now, this had all kinds of problems, economic and social, on Earth. Those aren't looked at too closely in any of the films, which I think is a missed opportunity, but maybe doesn't fit the superhero genre, so I can see why they only touch on it from time to time. But the implication is that losing half of the people on Earth was a pretty huge deal, was a massive blow to the people of Earth. And so anyway, they do find their way forward. Things do iron out. We do end up with a world that looks more or less like our own in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, despite the fact that all these cosmic alien invasions and half of life disappearing and superheroes running around all over the place. Their Earth looks largely like our Earth, which makes it relatable to the audience, so I get it. However, with the film The Eternals, and again, this is your last chance, there will be plenty of spoilers, things change. So the Eternals are essentially a kind of machine. Like they're a biological machine. So they would appear, by all rights to be, living, breathing organisms, and they appear human in the specific case of the Eternals on Earth, but they're actually created to fight something called the Deviants, which are also biological machines. And the idea is that, of course, the Eternals aren't aware of all this information at the time, and I'm not going to try to do this whole deep dive on the film. I just want to discuss this idea about Thanos, who's not even in the film, by the way. So the Eternals fight the Deviants, and they're both biological machines. The Deviants come along on a planet in its early days and kill off its super predators. So these Deviants are very overtly alien-looking creatures. They take different forms, and they basically evolve quickly to become the dominant life form, or to take out the dominant life forms on the planet. And this paves the way for sentient life form. So once sentient life forms evolve on a planet, the Eternals show up to be like the guardians of these sentient life forms. So they're limited in how much they can intervene, but to protect the population growth, essentially, is their primary function. So they function like ancient superheroes. And Eternals, they're roughly based on like Mediterranean, Greek mythology, but not exclusively kinds of ideas. So early mythology. So you have these Eternals. They're defeating the Deviants, holding them back, and at a point they just sort of let Earth kind of go on its own trajectory. The Deviants are defeated, and so history unfolds as more or less as we know it. Well, then Thanos, not in this film, but in the history in which the film takes place, the recent history, Thanos shows up, destroys half the population. Then half the population comes back. So, as part of this process, the Deviants show back up. And so the Eternals gather together to fight the Deviants. Now, what is revealed throughout the adventure of self-discovery that these Eternals go on is that this is all done at the behest of one entity. That the Deviants they've fought so hard to destroy are actually have the same creator as they themselves do. And the idea is that every planet that's going to host life is like an egg for a big giant space guy called a Celestial, and that one of the early Celestials set up this whole Deviant Eternals battle to make sure that sentient life develops on the planet. Because without sentient life, without abstract thinking, high functioning, they never use the word soul, but the idea that creatures that are higher life forms without their cerebral activity, these Celestials that are in these planet eggs would never grow or emerge. So we get to the point where there is a Celestial in Earth who is well on his way to hatching, which is going to be the destruction of the Earth. Well, that stopped. And the reason it stopped was because Thanos destroyed half the population of the planet, of the whole universe, but essentially of the planet Earth. So without all that mental energy doing what it was supposed to do to foster this Eternal, or this Celestial, the process was kind of slowed down or paused. It's not completely clear. But the Eternals come back on duty just in time to usher in the destruction of Earth for the birth of this Celestial. So there you go. Like, Thanos was right that the Earth was put in jeopardy by having so many people. Now, it was often thought that it was overpopulation and resource management, and maybe Earth hadn't got to that point yet, but maybe it was getting close, but other planets had already been through those stages. So it's questionable, what Thanos, it never was clear, and it's certainly questionable what exactly Thanos was set, why he felt like half the population of the universe needed to be destroyed. But as a matter of fact, for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Earth was very, very close to destruction by the birth of this Celestial that's going to break out of its egg, which just so happens to be the planet everybody's living on. And by decreasing the population for a 5-year period, he put a pause on that process. So he had saved Earth, at least temporarily. So the Eternals have to decide for themselves whether they want to continue as they're designed to do and support the Celestials and allow Earth to be destroyed and to allow this Celestial to emerge from Earth, or if they have fully fallen in love with the people of Earth after all these, an eternity, they're Eternals, an eternity of living on Earth, if they love the humans enough to save them from this fate. And so, unsurprisingly, they do save humanity from this fate, and they actually go against the Celestial that's being born and stop him from being born, which stops the Earth from being destroyed. So even if there was this arguably abstract or higher morality that indicates that these Celestials being born is the greater good, and that these planets that are sacrificed in the process, is just a tragic, unfortunate consequence. The movie itself shows that saving Earth, even with one of the Celestials dying in the process, is the morally good choice, at least according to the film, which means Thanos, when he destroyed half of the life in the universe, saved 100% of the people left on Earth from being killed by the emergence of this celestial creature. It's very convoluted. Granted, I wasn't a huge fan of the Eternals film, but it does lend a new piece of evidence to this argument that Thanos was right. But it doesn't quite end there, because Thanos is not from Earth. Surprise, he's from a planet called Titan. I actually don't think that the Titan that he's from in the movies is the Titan like moon in our solar system. It's not 100% clear, but at any rate, at one point they're on the Avengers and some of the Guardians of the Galaxy and the characters of the Marvel Cinematic Universe are on Titan, and they want to draw Thanos out. But while they're there, we as the viewer see some strange things going on. Gravity is kind of mucky. Things kind of float away. There's large chunks of the planet that are unmoored from the planet. And one of the characters even mentions that the axis has been knocked like really, really far off. And so at the time, we're just left thinking, well, this is Thanos' world. This is part of what taught him the idea that there was too many people in the universe, and maybe the competing for resources was the thing. So maybe they had a war, maybe they had some kind of space weapons we don't understand. But now, after having seen the Eternals, I'm thinking not just that the planet was devastated, but the strange ways in which it was devastated are probably, and again, physics is pretty wonky in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to begin with, so things don't operate exactly like we think they should. That these gravimetric disturbances on this planet, and this destroyed planet that's left over, that Thanos is allegedly from, is in fact the leftover of a celestial having been born. Now, Thanos never names any of this explicitly, but why would he? He sees everybody as beneath him. He doesn't think anybody can understand or appreciate his plan. Even many of the people that are closest to him, he knows they're just sort of run-of-the-mill evil, right? He sees himself as serving some higher good, but he recognizes that other creatures that see themselves as good aren't going to throw in for destroying half the universe. So he just makes use of very sinister characters because it's going to help him get the job done. So Thanos does what he does, and apparently he did it because his own home planet was destroyed by a celestial being born. So he understands. Now, there's some evidence that he might not have known it. So I'm willing to go with the idea that he just didn't bother to explain it to anyone else. But there's some evidence that he might not have known it, because at the end of the Eternals film, a new character is introduced whose name is Star Fox. And no, not do a barrel roll Star Fox, but a Marvel comic character called Star Fox. And some of these names, they get pretty wild. But anyway, he is who he is. And he's introduced as the brother of Thanos, the Mad Titan. And Star Fox is also an Eternal. Not an Eternal from Earth, but an Eternal from apparently somewhere else out in the galaxy. So, if he's Thanos' brother, and he's an Eternal, is Thanos an Eternal? Was Thanos, like the characters of the Eternals film, actually a servant of the Celestials, and he tried to warn his people? Even if he didn't fully understand, he, on some level, as an Eternal, knew the Celestial was going to grow as their population grew and was going to destroy their planet to be born, and he tried to warn them, and they didn't listen, and they suffered the fate. It certainly seems like that's the case. And even also in the Eternals, there is something called Mad Wiry. Now, when I watched the film, the whole time I thought they were calling it Mad Mary, and I didn't really understand why they would call it that. But it was mentioned again later, and I was like, oh, it's Mad Wiry. And so they were getting memories from previous lives. So apparently these Eternals aren't destroyed with the planets that they're sent to cultivate, and then they are reprogrammed to be sent to new planets. So this planet that the Eternals of the film are on, Earth, is not the first time they've served as Eternals. It's not the first planet that they've overseen the destruction of. And so this Mad Wiry, one of the characters, is experiencing memories from a previous life and is concerned for the fate of the people of Earth, of the people of the planet, because on some level she remembers, at least in part, the destruction of a previous planet. So could Thanos have been the same kind of situation for the planet of Titan that he was on? So he was having these similar kind of symptoms and was trying to, because we know he was trying to warn his people of the dangers of overpopulation. That much is very explicit. So with all this new information that he's an Eternal and that Eternals service these Celestials who eventually destroy the planets that birth their children, it looks like he had this madness, and he's even called the Mad Titan. That is like his actual moniker at different points in the Marvel storylines, comic books and movies. So it looks like Thanos was an Eternal, and he knew that his people were going to be killed by a Celestial being born, and they continued to overpopulate, and they didn't listen to him. Based on what we see of the planet Titan, it suffered some kind of destruction that is very atypical of like a war, like a traditional destruction of a planet. Well, I don't know how planets tend to be destroyed, so I don't know if that's fair to say, but it's a strange destruction of the planet, which seems like it could fit with a Celestial being born. And then because he survives this himself, he goes on this bizarre crusade to destroy half of all life in the universe. Well, you have to imagine all life in the universe are on planets. They fly around in spaceships and stuff, but from hop to hop, people are on planets. And if these planets are all, or at least many of them, housing Celestials that are just waiting for enough population, enough mental energy to be born, if you cut all life in the universe in half, that puts that process on ice. All of not just Earth, but all of these planets now have their Celestials inside slowed down in their development, whether they're early or whether they're late. They're all slowed down, and it's kind of like a stay of execution for all life in the universe. So Thanos was right. We don't have to like it. It can be awkward, but as the Marvel Cinematic Universe is currently written, Thanos is right. Now, will they change nuances? Will they add layers of implication that again make him wrong, that explain why these processes have to go forward? Maybe. But then, if that's the case, the Eternals shouldn't have saved Earth. Because if Thanos is wrong, and these Celestials have to be born to continue whatever evolution the universe is on, or to fight some other mysterious threat, you have to imagine these massive cosmic beings have some kind of enemy of their own. In fact, I think that they do. I can't remember now. I wasn't going to discuss this, but since I'm on a roll, there is some kind of like eternal darkness, uncreation kind of creature out there in the cosmos that does fight the Celestials, because in the films we do see a place called Nowhere. That's Nowhere with a K at the beginning, like no. And it's the head of a Celestial that's being harvested for its mineral properties, and it's being inhabited by other creatures, and it's kind of functions like a moon-ish, like a space station kind of thing, but it is the head of a Celestial, and I there's some creature out there that killed it, and I think it's connected to the symbiotes. So if you're familiar with like Venom and Carnage, they're alien life forms that cling to other life forms and kind of use them to get to do whatever it is they do, and a lot of times they're kind of maniacal and don't have a clear agenda. But I think a death is their agenda. There is this anti-life force out there that the Celestials oppose. So if the Celestials need to continue to fill their ranks, then it is the destiny of all planets with sentient life to eventually be sacrificed for the birth of a new Celestial to continue this cosmic war. So either Thanos is right, and we should stop these Celestials from being born to save the planets and all the people living on them, or at least half the people living on them, or we have to allow these planets, including Earth, to be destroyed so their Celestials can be born and can go out into the cosmos and fight these cosmic wars that really seem irrelevant to people just trying to make a life on their little planets like little old Earth. So that's my 2022 update to Thanos is right. If this content is amusing to you, please like the video, please leave a comment. I'm kind of experimenting with lots of different types of videos, try to see what people are interested in. I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about, but I can kind of lean towards certain things, or make extra videos towards certain concepts if that seems to be where the interest is. So I'm going to fulfill my interest, but I can also kind of make that mutual. So let me know if video number 12 here was interesting to you. And with that, I'm going to call it done.